Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about survey research, which is a type of quantitative approach. So what is survey research? Okay, so when you have curiosity to understand about people's thoughts, feelings and opinions, what do? We ask them questions, right? If you want to know about a person's perception towards health, so you ask them questions regarding health. You want to ask them about their perception about COVID-19, so you ask questions about it. So basically in survey researches, you wanted to get an overall idea about an issue, about a situation, and what people feel about that particular situation, what is their thinking about it. Okay, so when you are interested in just understanding about people's thoughts, opinions or feelings, when you just wanted to ask them about these things, it is when you use a survey research. So in survey research, there are two important things that we need to look into. When you are conducting a survey, the survey has to have good sample and good questions. That is what we mean by sampling and predetermined questions, because only with the proper sample you can get the right answers. So if you want to know about difficulty or the perception of sitting for UPSR exams or a STPM or an A levels exams, you have to ask the specific sample. You cannot ask people who are teachers about taking a perception of taking the test, because they are not the sample who are sitting for the exam. So for example, if you want to ask about drug addicts, okay, you want to know about drug addicts coping strategies, so you cannot ask general people's coping strategies, because these coping strategies that you want to identify or your research is about drug addicts, so the sample has to be appropriate. The same times you have to ask appropriate questions. That's what we mean by predetermined question. So if you want to ask a group of a sample that you are interested in studying, you have to ask them appropriate questions. So just like earlier I've said, if you want to know about drug addicts coping strategies, you have to ask them coping strategies. You cannot ask them about anxiety, you cannot ask them about opinion about medications. Okay, so you have to be very precise. Only then you will get the appropriate information. So survey research is conducted to understand about people's thoughts, feelings and opinions. So in order to know about this overall idea about a situation, you have to get the appropriate sample and also the appropriate questions. Okay, so sampling, we have talked about sampling designs in previous lectures, so you know how to get the samples. So I'm not going to repeat that in this session. So in this session we are going to talk more on the predetermined question. So what do we mean by predetermined question? Meaning you need to have a set of questions before you ask your sample. So one of the things that we usually use is instruments, questionnaires. I think I'm very sure that most of you have experience in answering at least one questionnaire in your lifetime. But these questionnaires has been organized or developed by someone. This instrument has been developed by someone. So what is the process of developing it? Firstly, instrument is a collection of questions that used to gather about information. So what is the first step? If you want to develop an instrument or a questionnaire, you firstly need to know what do you want to measure or what do you want to ask from people. Okay, do you want to know about their anxiety? Do you want to know about their personality? Or do you want to know about their CGPA? So you need to know what information that you want to ask. Second, you have to decide how are you going to administer your questions. Okay, are you going to send them emails? Are you going to ask them face to face? Are you going to administer it face to face? Or are you going to use telephone or mobile to ask them the questions that you want to ask about? So the delivery method is important. Okay, as I say, I'm pretty sure that you have experience answering questionnaires, online questionnaires, and even paper pencil. Okay, so once you have identified the way of administering, the third step is you have to start preparing your draft of your instrument or your questions. Okay, so before that you need to actually know whether check is there any existing ones or you need to develop a new one. Okay, if there is already an existing one, why waste time? You can use the existing one. But some cases when there is something that is totally new, you want to explore it. For example, psychological distress during pandemic, for example. So maybe there is no instrument to measure it. So you might develop a totally new one. So always check for any pre-existing instruments or questionnaire. If you are developing it for the first time, what you need to do is you have to re-examine your questionnaire. So if you write your own questions, you need to check whether your questions actually measure what it wants to measure. Because sometimes we write according to our knowledge and interest. That might not really reflect on the reality. So what you need to do is you have to check with experts, people who are in the field, to say whether am I asking the right question to get the right information about a psychological stress or disorder. Okay, so that is step 4. The next step is you need to test the quality of the instrument. Okay, so this is when statistics comes into play. So you need to check whether people understand your question or not. So how many people understand, how many people don't understand? Is there any issue of validity, issue of reliability? How reliable is your instrument? Whenever does the score changes? Does the question sounds different to boys and girls? If you are using an instrument across gender, it has to be the same meaning. It cannot be at some point the question or the question that you're asking, it can be understood easier for the boys and difficult for the females. No, it has to be a standard questions. Okay, and finally, once you assess the quality, you need to revise them. So always revise. It's not a one-way process. Okay, instrument development, you have to go round and round until your final instrument or questionnaire is ready to be tested in real setting. So it has to achieve a really stable standard. Okay, now strategies in selecting or designing the questionnaire. So when you're asking, questionnaire is a collection of questions, right? Questions, items. So when you're asking people questions or items, keep a simple vocabulary. Don't show your talent in English or in other languages. Keep it simple, because you never know who is your audience yet. Maybe your target group is just school children, so you cannot use fancy languages or difficult vocabularies. Avoid double barrel question. In one question, don't ask two things. Okay, how and what. So you ask like how are you and what are you doing. There is two things that you're asking in a single question, and keep it brief. Don't have lengthy questions. Avoid biased questions, meaning don't ask questions that would be favorable or easy to one group of individuals. For example, don't ask questions about football if you have female participants. Those kind of bias. Don't ask about cooking classes if you are having boys in the group. Yes, nowadays there are girls who knows about football very well. There are boys who cooks very well. But you have to understand the general population. Okay. Next is check the appropriateness of language. Make sure that people can understand your language. Okay, that is important, whether they can understand you, the way you present it. And of course it has to be written in correct format. And present a scenario before asking questions. Just like in your exam questions, we give you a scenario first, and based on the scenario we ask question. We do not put the question first and scenario. This is like, will be confusing for your readers. So these are the things that you need to look into, some of the strategies, some of the tips that you need to look into when you are developing or writing your own questions. So now you have a proper sample. Okay, so you did your sampling. So what is sampling? Selecting appropriate sample for your study. So once you have selected your sampling, now you have your predetermined questions. What is next? Remember, in our survey we want to ask them question. So we have prepared our sample, we have got our question. What is next? You have to administer it. How? Administration can be into 3 different designs. So you can tell us like what is the structure or your plan to conduct the entire study. Okay, you want to do a survey, so you need to know how you are going to conduct the survey. So that is what we mean by design. So there are 3 different designs in cross-sectional. The first one is, in a survey research, the first one is cross-sectional design. Second is successive independent sample, and third one is longitudinal design. So what do you mean by cross-sectional design? Cross-sectional design is very commonly used in survey research. What they usually do is they take one or more samples from the population at one time. Okay, for example, I would like to study about mental health among youngsters during COVID-19 pandemic. So what I do is I look into the youngster population and I select samples. Maybe I select sample, one is from public university, one is from private universities, one is from school. So all these youngsters, I take the samples at the same time. Okay, so I go to the school. Okay, in this month I'm going to cover my my private and public, and then next 2 weeks later I'm going to take it from my schools. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is you do the study once, that's it. You have a timeline. So from from June 1st until June 30th I'm going to conduct the study. So I know I've identified my population and I'm going to go there and get my sample once, that's it. Okay, and based on that I'm going to describe the questions that they have asked. Okay, so I can when I'm doing that I get different samples. So I get samples from public, private, and I get sample from schools. So I can also make comparison on the youth mental health status between public and private universities. I can also make comparison between university and school students. So cross-sectional design is you are doing the study one time. Okay, and at the same time you collect samples from different groups. It's not necessary to get different groups, you can only go for one group, but you can also collect more than one group. Okay, but everything happens at just one timeline. Once you collect it, that's it. You don't go second time to go and get it. No. So what is successive independent sample? This is a second design in survey research. So different samples of respondent from population are gathered. Okay, so meaning you take if I want to study about the difficulty or people's perception about statistics, So what I do is I take students of those who are taking statistics this semester, and I administer a question about their perception about statistics scores. And then the next semester I'll have a new set of students taking the stats class. So I give them the same set of question and ask them to answer. So what I'm getting is I'm getting different samples of the potential population, because I'm taking samples that has different experiences. Okay, so my first one is the timeline. So the first time was the in 2019. So I'm taking the same group of people, my population, those who are taking statistics class, but the respondents will be different because I'm taking them from the following year. So the first time I take 2019, the second time I take my sample from 2020, but they answer the same questions. Okay, so my overall population is students who are taking statistics class. But what I do is, rather than taking on the same year one shot, I am taking it twice. I'm taking it as the sample in 2019 and I'm taking the sample at 2020. So lastly is longitudinal design under correlational survey research. So what do you mean by longitudinal design? Longitudinal meaning that you examine someone or a research participant over a long time or period. Okay, so what we are doing is we follow the particular respondent from example from 2015 until 2020. So we take the same sample at 2015 and follow them every year to see how are they responding over the time. So is there any changes or any thoughts or any feeling changes across the timeline? Okay, so cross-sectional, you take the sample at just one time point, successive, same population but different timelines. Longitudinal design is you take the same respondent over a long time period. Okay, so all these different design, how can you get the information from? So you can run them a mail survey, you can post them a survey in a paper pencil, they answer and then they post it back to you. Or you can do personal interviews, you can do telephone survey, or you can do an internet survey. I think internet survey most of you have experience. Personal interviews are usually done for people who has language problems or children or elders. So in these cases, or people with illness. So these people cannot answer on their own. So maybe when you interview them, you can get their responses and record it them. Okay.